All right. All right. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome again to another video review. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, as always, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa, baruchim. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. All praises to the Almighty Yah. Hallelujah.
So be it. Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. As always, I'm joined by my most esteemed Ak Akenanaya. Shalom, Aki.
Hey, shalom, shalom, Aki. Shalom, shalom, Yasharal. Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shah Barakatham.
Yes, indeed. Peace to the children of Israel and Most High Yahweh, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shai, bless you. All right, so we are back with another video review. We got some interesting videos lined up for us, and we're going to jump right into them. This very first video comes to us by way of Black Journals, and it is called Marcus Garvey Showed Governments Their Weakness. This is about a half an hour video, so enjoy and let's see what we can learn. Here we go.
For 250 years, we have struggled under the burden and rigors of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cry is raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. Do you think it unreasonable that we, the blacks of the world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? The Negro is a man. We represent the new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. Where the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use, they have not the resources to develop nor the intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to abuse God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping.
In the early 20th century, Black people around the world lived under the crushing weight of oppression. Across the American South, Jim Crow laws violently enforced segregation and second-class citizenship. In the Caribbean and Africa, European colonial powers ruled with exploitative brutality, denying Black people their basic rights and identity. It was a world of stark injustice where hope for freedom often seemed like a distant dream. Into this world stepped a man who simply refused to accept this fate, a fiery orator from Jamaica, a man named Marcus Mosiah Garvey. With passionate words and an uncompromising vision, Garvey ignited a movement that spanned oceans and continents. He rallied millions of African descendants to believe in their own pride and power at a time when such confidence was dangerous and rare. Yes, indeed, Marcus Garvey was more than a political leader. He was the living embodiment of a struggle for dignity. Clad in military-style regalia with plumed hats and epaulets, he would sometimes lead grand parades through Harlem as if commanding an army of liberation. His booming voice urged messages of Africa for the Africans and Black unity, electrifying crowds that had never before seen a Black man carry himself like a head of state. Under Garvey's leadership, the Universal Negro Improvement Association became the largest mass movement of Black people in history up to that time. From the ghettos of Harlem to the villages of West Africa, his call resonated: stand up, reclaim your heritage, and never be ashamed of being Black. This documentary explores why there will never be another fighter quite like Marcus Garvey. It is a story of defiance and hope, of a man who dared to demand freedom on his own terms. So if you're ready to confront power, question history, and understand the roots of modern Black liberation, this is a journey you won't want to miss. Subscribe to our channel for more brilliant histories told without distortion. And let's begin.
Over 100 years ago, the Black nationalist movement in America reached an unprecedented level of popularity because of the efforts of the charismatic leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Marcus Garvey. Born in Jamaica, Garvey grew up in poverty. He came to understand race relations through the lens of British colonialism throughout the Caribbean and Latin America.
A child of colonial Jamaica, Marcus Garvey was born in 1887 with rebellion in his blood. He grew up in a society stratified by color and class, where the legacy of slavery still loomed large. Young Garvey witnessed how Black Jamaicans, no matter how hard they worked or how talented they were, remained second-class citizens in their own homeland. Determined to uplift his people, Garvey voraciously read books from his father's small library and listened to the stories of elders. He was especially inspired by the idea that Black people had a proud history before slavery, a heritage in Africa that had been stolen or forgotten. This spark would later become a cornerstone of his movement, the insistence that Black history and culture be celebrated rather than erased. As a teenager, Garvey learned the printing trade and got involved in workers' rights activism. But Jamaica felt too small for his growing ambitions. In his early travels around Central America, Garvey saw that Black laborers in Panama and Costa Rica were treated as expendable cogs in colonial economies. In 1912, he ventured to London, the heart of the British Empire, and there he encountered African and West Indian intellectuals who discussed Pan-African unity. In London, he also read Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up From Slavery, which argued that Black people could achieve progress through self-improvement and economic self-reliance, rather than directly confronting white racism. Washington's approach profoundly influenced Garvey. It convinced him that education, economic development, and racial pride were key to empowering Black communities. Galvanized by these ideas, Garvey returned to Jamaica in 1914 with a grand plan. On August 1st, 1914, he and a few colleagues founded the Universal Negro Improvement and Conservation Association and African Communities League, shortened to the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. Garvey's fledgling organization adopted the motto, "One God, one aim, one destiny," which reflected its sweeping mission to unite all people of African ancestry worldwide. The UNIA aimed to uplift Black people's economic conditions, celebrate African cultures, and ultimately establish a strong, independent Black nation in Africa free from colonial rule. This was an audacious goal for a small group in Jamaica, and at first Garvey struggled to gain support at home. Many in the island's Black middle class saw his ideas as too radical or impractical. Undeterred, Garvey set his sights on a bigger stage, the United States of America, where millions of Black people lived under Jim Crow but were also starting to assert their rights. Garvey arrived in the U.S. in 1916, landing in Harlem, the vibrant Black neighborhood in New York City that was a magnet for Black migrants from the South and the Caribbean. He came hoping to meet Booker T. Washington, not knowing that Washington had died the previous year. Though disappointed, Garvey soon found himself amid a social whirlwind. World War I was raging abroad and reshaping global politics. At home, the first waves of the Great Migration were underway. Black families from the rural South moving northward by the thousands, seeking jobs and fleeing racist terror in the South. But even in northern cities, Black newcomers encountered harsh discrimination, low-wage labor, and cramped, segregated housing. The post-war period brought race riots in cities like East St. Louis and Chicago in 1917 to 1919, as white mobs attacked Black communities. This bloody outbreak, known as the Red Summer of 1919, left deep scars and a sense of betrayal in Black veterans who had hoped their wartime service might earn them respect at home. All of these factors created a tinderbox of Black frustration and yearning by the late 1910s. Garvey keenly observed that many working-class Black people were losing faith in ever achieving equality within the American system. They felt estranged, like men without a country, as some described, unwelcome in white society and disconnected from any African homeland. Into this atmosphere, Marcus Garvey's message fell like a spark on dry grass. In 1917, he began holding nightly lectures in a Harlem meeting hall, spreading his philosophy of Black self-reliance and unity. By 1918, he had launched a newspaper, Negro World, to trumpet news of Black achievements and African history to readers across the diaspora. His oratory was simple but powerful, roaring that Black people must take pride in themselves and carve their way to liberty by their own hands. Week by week, the crowds grew larger, drawn by Garvey's magnetic presence and the sheer boldness of his vision. What he was proposing, that Black people worldwide join together to uplift Africa and demand respect, was unheard of at the time. Yet for those hungry for hope, it sounded like salvation.
You have this really charismatic and dynamic individual, and he's talking about, look, our place is never going to be here in the United States. It's never going to be in Europe. It's going to be in Africa. We need to reclaim Africa.
So Garvey is going to be preaching a philosophy of Black pride. He's going to come up with a scheme to repatriate to Africa. And he provides.
By 1919, Marcus Garvey's movement was catching fire. He organized dozens of Unia divisions in cities across the Northeast and Midwest. Membership rolls swelled into the hundreds of thousands, and Garvey himself claimed millions. While the true numbers were uncertain, it was clear that the Unia had tapped into a deep well of Black discontent and dreams. This was a grassroots movement. Many members were recent migrants, soldiers returning from the war, and working poor who felt alienated by both white society and the Black elite. Garvey offered them a new identity, not as powerless victims of racism, but as proud members of a global African nation in the making. By the dawn of the 1920s, Marcus Garvey had become a household name in Black communities far beyond Harlem. The Unia blossomed from a handful of followers into a vast, organized movement with chapters not only across the United States, but also in the Caribbean, Latin America, and even Africa. It was arguably the first Black nationalist crusade of global proportions. Garvey, bold and unapologetic, took on the mantle of a leader for all African descendants. He spoke of a new Negro who would no longer bow his head in shame, but instead hold it high with pride in his African heritage. Through the pages of Negro World, which at its peak reached tens of thousands of readers weekly, Garvey's ideas spread to port towns in the West Indies and were smuggled into African port cities. Colonial authorities in places like British Nigeria and French Senegal grew so alarmed that they banned Garvey's newspaper, fearing it would stir up anti-colonial sentiments among their Black subjects. They were right to be worried. Garvey's fiery rhetoric was planting seeds of liberation in minds across the seas. What made Garvey's movement so magnetic was its message of unity, pride, and economic empowerment. He taught that no matter where they lived, be it Alabama, or London, or Kingston, people of African descent were one people with a shared destiny. He urged Black folks to love their African features, to stop trying to emulate white society's standards, and to reclaim the beauty in dark skin and natural hair. Decades before slogans like "Black is beautiful" became popular, Garvey was already preaching it. At Unia rallies, he thundered that Black men and women should glorify in their African ancestry, that they were the descendants of great civilizations and should never be ashamed of who they are. This message was a balm to souls scarred by constant racism. It instilled in ordinary Black individuals a sense that you are somebody, that you come from a lineage of worth and can take a future into your own hands. Garvey firmly believed that economic power was essential for Black liberation. He observed that as long as Black people depended on white businesses and employers for every necessity, they would remain vulnerable and disrespected. The solution he proposed was to create a separate Black economy that could sustain the community. To that end, he founded an array of Black-owned enterprises under the Unia banner. The most famous was the Negro Factories Corporation, which established grocery stores, restaurants, a laundry, a printing press, and other small industries run by and for Black people in Harlem. Garvey implored his followers to patronize these businesses and prove that they could be self-sufficient.
The centerpiece of Garvey's program was the creation of the Black Star Line, a steamship line launched to transport African Americans who wished to emigrate to Africa.
The Black Star Line is this idea that Garvey can buy ships through the support of local African American people, sending in money so you can have a share in the Black Star Line. And these ships were going to take thousands of people back to Africa, to the colony that Garvey was going to establish.
Garvey's idea was revolutionary: a Black-owned fleet that could carry passengers and cargo between the Americas, the Caribbean, and Africa. It was a direct challenge to the white-dominated shipping industry of the time. Indeed, one major line was called the White Star Line. Through enthusiastic fundraising and the sale of stock certificates to UNIA members, the Black Star Line was able to purchase 3 second-hand ships. One can imagine the excitement this project inspired. For Black people who had endured being cargo on slave ships generations before, now owning ships of their own felt like poetic justice and a tangible step toward autonomy. When the first ship, the SS Yarmouth, docked in Harlem in 1919, thousands gathered to celebrate. Though the vessel was old and in need of repair, in the eyes of the people, it was a majestic symbol of hope riding the Hudson River. At the same time, the movement took on the trappings of a government in exile, almost a nation within a nation. Garvey created an elaborate organizational structure for the UNIA. There was an African Legion, a paramilitary group of men who drilled in military-style uniforms, as if forming an army for an eventual African homeland. There were the Black Cross nurses, women in crisp uniforms who would march in parades and provide community health services, symbolizing care and solidarity within the race. Garvey himself adopted regal titles. In 1920, at an international UNIA convention in New York, members elected him Provisional President of Africa. Delegates from over 20 countries gathered for a grand UNIA convention in New York. Garvey, now calling himself Provisional President of Africa, donned a military-style uniform and reviewed ranks of UNIA members. An estimated 50,000 Black people paraded through Harlem carrying banners calling for African freedom, a sight of Black pride and solidarity unlike anything seen before in America. By the mid-1920s, the influence of Garvey's movement had reached its zenith. The UNIA claimed millions of members worldwide. While that figure was likely inflated, even conservative estimates acknowledged that hundreds of thousands were actively involved, making it the largest Black mass movement up to that point. Branches existed throughout the Caribbean and Central America, and even in African cities like Lagos and Accra, where Garvey's emissaries spread his philosophies. Garvey had become a living legend among the African diaspora, revered by the masses who affectionately nicknamed him Black Moses. He was seen as the deliverer who would lead his people out of bondage into a promised land of freedom. Though he had never set foot in Africa, his followers believed that under Garvey's guidance, they would one day establish a proud Black nation on African soil, free from white domination. However, even as Marcus Garvey reached these heights, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. His movement's rapid rise drew intense scrutiny and opposition from many quarters, white and Black alike. Garvey had built a vast following and tangible economic projects, but now he faced questions and challenges that would soon test the very foundations of his crusade. No great revolution goes unchallenged, and Marcus Garvey's movement was no exception. As his influence grew, so did the ranks of his enemies. Despite all his accomplishments, Garvey discovered that fighting for Black liberation meant facing fire from all sides: white authorities, rival Black leaders, and even former allies. This period would reveal the limits of his approach and the flaws that would ultimately be his undoing. One of Garvey's earliest and most relentless critics was W.E.B. Du Bois, the renowned African-American scholar and a leader of the NAACP. Du Bois, who believed in integrating Black Americans into mainstream society through education and legal rights, viewed Garvey's separatist ideology and Back to Africa rhetoric as dangerously misguided. Du Bois even labeled Garvey the most dangerous enemy of the Black race, fearing these ideas would set back the fight for equal rights and play into the hands of white supremacists. Indeed, Garvey's actions sometimes gave his opponents ammunition. Garvey even made the controversial decision to meet with the white supremacist Ku Klux Klan in 1922, reasoning that both shared a desire for separation. This move appalled Black America. How could a champion of his people sit with the very architects of their oppression? The incident badly tarnished Garvey, standing among other Black leaders who saw it as a reckless and unforgivable misstep. Meanwhile, federal law enforcement was eyeing Garvey's movement with growing concern. J. Edgar Hoover, a young Justice Department official and future FBI director, saw Garvey as a potential subversive.
Garvey was growing too powerful. J. Edgar Hoover is going to hire their first Negro agents to subvert Marcus Garvey. And eventually, they're going to say that he's been committing mail fraud with the Black Star Line scheme.
Hoover's agents began monitoring Garvey and even planted an informant inside the UNIA, looking for any excuse to shut him down. That chance came when the Black Star Line began to flounder financially amid mismanagement and corruption. In 1922, Garvey and several associates were indicted for mail fraud, accused of deceiving Black investors with false promises. He vehemently proclaimed his innocence, arguing that he was being persecuted for daring to uplift his race. To many followers, it did look like a frame-up. Plenty of white businessmen engaged in shady dealings without such consequences, so why were authorities so eager to punish Garvey? Garvey chose to defend himself at his 1923 trial, a bold move that likely hurt his case. Despite his passionate arguments, a jury found him guilty and a judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison. The conviction was a crushing blow. To Garvey's supporters, it was proof that the government would stoop to anything to destroy a Black leader. To his critics, it confirmed that some of his ventures had been reckless. In 1925, Garvey entered Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Even behind bars, he kept writing letters and articles to inspire his followers, but the UNIA could not survive intact without him. Over nearly 2 years of his imprisonment, the organization fractured. Lacking Garvey's leadership, divisions and rivalries grew, membership declined, and the once mighty movement began to slowly collapse. Facing pressure from Black leaders and international supporters who pleaded his case, President Calvin Coolidge commuted Garvey's sentence in 1927. However, the U.S. government seized the opportunity to rid itself of a troublesome agitator. As soon as Garvey was released, he was deported from the United States. He boarded a ship back to Jamaica, effectively in exile from the country where his movement had achieved its greatest heights. As the boat left New York Harbor, Garvey took what might have been a last wistful look at the Statue of Liberty, a bitter symbol of the freedom denied to him and his people. Garvey left America with a mix of accomplishments and heartbreak. He had built one of the most significant grassroots movements in African American history and inspired millions. Yet he saw his reputation smeared, his organization in disarray, and his grand economic projects in ruins. Many of the oppressed Black men and women who had placed their hopes in him now felt adrift once more. It was a tragic turn for a man who had aimed so high. But Garvey's story was not over. Not yet. He would not give up on his vision, and even in exile, the ripples of his movement would continue to spread in surprising ways. Marcus Garvey returned to his homeland of Jamaica in 1927 as a polarizing figure, celebrated by many common people as a hero, yet viewed with wariness by others who had followed his troubles. Still only in his late 30s, Garvey did not consider his fight over. Though he would never again command a mass movement on the scale of the Unia's heyday, Garvey's legacy began to take on a life of its own, inspiring new leaders and movements that carried forward parts of his vision. Back in Jamaica, Garvey tried to continue his mission. He even formed a political party and briefly held a local office, but the colonial authorities still viewed him as dangerous. After he was jailed following a U.S. federal conviction for mail fraud related to the Black Star Line shipping venture, charges stemming from the alleged use of misleading information in stock promotions, Garvey became frustrated with the limits of political and organizational action in the Caribbean. In 1935, he moved to London, seeking a larger platform once again. In London, Garvey lived out his final years in relative quiet, publishing a small journal called The Black Man and watching from afar as the world evolved. His original organization never regained its strength, but even as Garvey faded from the spotlight, the seeds he planted were taking root elsewhere. Garvey's greatest legacy may have been the psychological emancipation he sparked. Across the Caribbean and the Americas, a new sense of Black pride took root that never fully faded. In Jamaica, the Rastafari religious movement of the 1930s revered Garvey as a kind of prophet for urging people to look to Africa, a vision they saw fulfilled in the crowning of Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie. Decades later, reggae music would carry Garvey's message even further. Bob Marley's famous call to emancipate yourselves from mental slavery was a direct echo of Garvey's teachings. In the United States, Garveyism laid groundwork for later Black nationalist movements. The early Nation of Islam, for example, drew on Garvey's model. Elijah Muhammad himself had been a Garvey follower. The Nation of Islam preached Black economic self-reliance and separatism in a way that closely mirrored Garvey's program. Its most famous spokesman, Malcolm X, grew up with Garveyite parents and would echo Garvey's calls for Black pride and Pan-African unity during the 1960s. Garvey's influence reached Africa as well. Many figures in the fight against colonialism read Garvey's works. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana openly acknowledged Garvey's teachings. Ghana's national flag would even bear a black star in tribute to Garvey's Black Star Line. Other independence leaders, from Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya to organizers of the 1945 Pan-African Congress in Manchester, were similarly inspired by Garvey's Pan-African vision of a united and free Africa. In this way, even as the Unia faded, Garvey's core message energized anti-colonial and civil rights struggles far beyond his own reach. Even the integrationist leader, Martin Luther King Jr., later acknowledged that Garvey had been the first Black man to instill a sense of dignity and destiny in millions of downtrodden African Americans. By 1940, Marcus Garvey was only 52 years old, but he had lived through a lifetime's worth of triumph and tragedy. That year, alone in London, he suffered a stroke and died. World War II was raging, and news of his passing was largely overshadowed by global events. Yet those who knew his work mourned the loss of a visionary. In 1964, as Jamaica and much of Africa had achieved the independence Garvey dreamed of, Jamaica brought his remains home. He was reinterred in Kingston's National Heroes Park with full honors and declared Jamaica's first national hero. The boy from St. Ann's Bay who had once imagined a Black empire was now memorialized by the nation he had so dearly loved. The years and decades after Garvey's death proved the prophet-like quality of some of his warnings. He had preached that political freedom without economic independence would leave Black nations weak. And indeed, many newly independent African states struggled under neo-colonial economic domination. He had urged Black people to take pride in themselves when it was unfashionable. And by the 1970s, celebrating African heritage had become central to Black identity worldwide. Leaders who followed may not have replicated Garvey's exact program, but they built upon the foundation he laid. Marcus Garvey had been the first to articulate a comprehensive vision of global Black unity and empowerment, and that blueprint guided generations after him. However, amid all these tributes and influences, one thing was becoming clear. None of the movements and figures that followed could truly recreate what Garvey had forged. For all the people he influenced, and they were many, there still had never again been a movement quite like Garvey's Unia, nor a leader quite like Garvey himself. Why was that so? What was it about Marcus Garvey and his moment in time that made his movement possible and impossible to duplicate? With the hindsight of history, it is apparent that Marcus Garvey was the product of a unique convergence of personality, historical timing, and social conditions that have never been precisely repeated. One key factor was timing. Garvey rose up when white supremacy was openly brutal worldwide and Black people had few avenues to resist. In the 1910s and 1920s, African nations were still colonized and African Americans lived under Jim Crow. Freedom was a distant dream. Garvey's separatist global approach resonated because all other doors to equality were closed. In later decades, circumstances changed. Colonialism collapsed and civil rights were won in the U.S., so the idea of a single Back to Africa crusade lost appeal as Black people pursued justice within their own nations. Garvey's all-encompassing movement fit a moment in history that has not recurred. Another factor was Garvey's charisma and style. He was an extraordinary orator with a flair for drama and an unshakable confidence. He could make downtrodden people feel proud and part of a grand mission. Many Black leaders since have been charismatic, but none have tried to mobilize the entire African diaspora around one movement as Garvey did. His vision was sweeping and bold, and it took a rare audacity to even attempt what he did. There were also lessons learned from Garvey's downfall. Later, activists saw how his movement struggled with internal problems and how brutally the establishment reacted to him. They adjusted their strategies accordingly, often aiming for more modest goals or operating less openly. After Garvey, government agencies were quick to suppress emerging Black movements, as seen later in FBI operations against civil rights and Black power groups. In short, the powers that be became determined to prevent another Garvey from rising, and Black leaders themselves often avoided, painting as large a target on their backs. Additionally, the goals of Black movements changed. After Garvey's era, most Black communities sought to win rights in their home countries rather than pursue mass immigration or a separate nation. As African nations won independence and African Americans gained civil rights, their struggles became more locally focused and diverse. No single leader could again claim the loyalty of the entire African diaspora. Different communities had different priorities. The kind of umbrella movement Garvey led gave way to numerous smaller movements addressing specific national or local issues. Garvey's particular methods were also one of a kind. His mix of pomp and military-style organization gave the UNIA a nation-like feel that few movements have duplicated. The Nation of Islam came somewhat close in mid-20th century, but on a much smaller scale. In the modern era, a leader declaring himself President of Africa in a plumed hat and gold-braided uniform would likely be dismissed or even ridiculed. Garvey's style worked in his time, but would not translate well to later generations. He mastered the media of his day, newspapers, parades, stirring speeches, in a way that would be hard to replicate now in the age of television and social media. No later leader has captured global Black attention with Garvey's combination of showmanship and substance. Finally, Marcus Garvey was truly one of a kind. His combination of visionary ideas, mass appeal, and willingness to take enormous risks has not been seen again. Other leaders have either not dared to attempt such sweeping goals or have focused on one country or cause. After seeing Garvey's fate, few were eager to stake everything on a Black Star Line scale venture for fear of the consequences. Garvey's boldness was both his making and his undoing, a duality that no successor has quite embodied. As we consider all of these factors, it becomes evident why Marcus Garvey stands alone in history. He was the right man at the right time with the right message, a convergence that may never happen in the same way again. This is not to say the world no longer needs fighters for Black liberation. On the contrary, many are still needed, but they will fight in new ways on different fronts and likely without the sweeping centralized movement that Garvey once led. Indeed, there will never be another fighter exactly like Marcus Garvey, because the mold was broken after him. History shifted course because of what he did. The world he fought against also changed, in part due to his influence, and new challenges require new kinds of leadership. But every time Black people assert that their lives matter, every time an independent African nation raises a flag with a Black star, every time a child of the diaspora learns about African kings and queens with pride, Marcus Garvey's spirit is there. It lives on in the insistence that Black people everywhere deserve respect, self-determination, and the freedom to shape their own futures. If the powerful life of Garvey moved you, then let it travel. Like this video so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Add your...
All right, all praises to the Most High. Interesting bit of information. We've covered some of Marcus Garvey in the previous times, but it's not a whole lot of information as it pertains to him. But it's always interesting to learn a little bit more. I, for one, thought that he was more recent than what he was. So that's why it's good to have these reminders. Also, I want to say probably one of our hindrances at his particular time was trying to put all so-called Black people together, because there's a specification that needs to be understood. All Black people are not one people. There are many different Black people, so-called Black people. And many of us, some of us are Israelites, and others of us are go back to various other peoples. So the sons of Ham, He had 4 sons. They all had children. The Cushites, the Canaanites, the Libyans, and the Ethiopians. The Egyptians. And so you can't just put all black people into this box. So I mean, I in no shade against the dear departed elder, but that's something that we've had to learn, and we had to learn from the scriptures. Uh, brother Elder Garvey didn't have that, but what does that say about his? Does that say anything negative about him? No. I mean, he had what he had at that time. Could Hazaki Yahu duplicate what Marcus Garvey was able to do? Absolutely not. Probably not likely, I should say. But he did magnificent work, and he sought to rectify for his people. That's the main thing. And he stood up and took charge and did it. And he did the very best he could, and was so close to accomplishing. I believe if it would have been interesting if he had not been betrayed. What could have transpired if not for betrayal? How far could he have gotten? So I'm gonna leave you with that. Go ahead, Aki.
Indeed, really good segue. Like, what could have been accomplished had he had the Black Star or the White Star boat company that he had? If that had maintained, then we would have seen our people returning back to a Kebulon, as I don't know. I guess we would say tourists, and being able to be in trade and just in negotiations with our people over there. I think that definitely spooked the powers that be at the time. And you heard about how he pretty much was suffered of the same pro intel that we hear about with the Panthers.
Yeah.
Or other leaders that we had back in the day. The same thing was done with Garvey. So it's very that's kind of troubling that the same tactics have been continuing to work.
Yeah.
But he gave the people hope. And you're right. What would have happened, Doc, if he wasn't betrayed? And the idea, I think we would have saw a lot of more Black Wall Streets. It would have been a lot more, man. But that couldn't have been the Father's timing. It's not how the Father wanted it to be. Like, we're over here not because we did well, and this is our punishment. So, however, we know that what we get out of the scriptures, pretty much tells us that we'll see a kingdom that is 10 times better than a Black Wall Street, and righteousness will reign, and the Most High power will be with us, dwelling with us. So I'll yield there.
All praises, beautiful, beautiful indeed. Yeah, we look forward to that day. It'll have been interesting to see what could have been, but we look forward to the real thing, the real deal thing coming about. So, all right, we're gonna move on to the next video. This next video comes to us by way of Black Stories Untold. This is the many beefs of our dear brother elder as well, Malcolm X, for what you call Black History Month. So let's get to it.
They pumped 21 bullets into Malcolm X's body.
He sustained one shot in the lower right chin, and the other 6 hit him in the chest and body.
While his pregnant wife watched, while his 4 daughters screamed, while the crowd that came to hear him speak sat frozen in terror. Blood pooled on the Audubon ballroom stage as Betty Shabazz crawled to her husband's body, pressing her hands against the wounds, trying to hold his life inside.
I heard shots, and I saw people crawling on the floor. I saw, and so I got down too. Then when I was looking out, and I saw someone look in amazement to the front, I knew they had shot my husband.
But here's what will haunt you forever. Every single person with power in America knew this murder was coming. The FBI had the assassination plans. The police removed security that day. The Nation of Islam held the weapons. Civil rights leaders stayed silent. They all wanted the same thing: Malcolm X dead. The declassified documents prove it. FBI file 100-399321 shows they tracked him for 11 years. NYPD reports from 2020 reveal how cops stepped aside. Secret Nation of Islam recordings expose the plot from inside. But the most shocking part? The one detail that connects all these enemies together. The terrifying plan Malcolm was about to unleash that united them in murder. Today, we're exposing how America's most powerful forces, black and white, religious and government, formed an unholy alliance to destroy one man, because that one man was about to bring their entire system crashing down. Massachusetts officials still refuse to discuss what happened in Room 17 of Norfolk Prison's education building. Between 1948 and 1952, that room witnessed a transformation so dangerous that prison authorities tried to shut it down 4 times. Because in that room, Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. Malcolm Little entered Charlestown State Prison in February 1946 as prisoner 22843. Burglary conviction, 10-year sentence. By the time he transferred to Norfolk Prison Colony in 1948, something had fundamentally changed. Norfolk had the only prison debate team in America competing against universities. Their record from 1933 to 1966, 144 wins, 8 losses. Harvard law students, Yale debaters, MIT scholars, all losing to convicted felons. Malcolm joined the team in 1949. The topics were explosive. When they debated capital punishment, Malcolm argued that perfect deterrence would require mandatory death sentences, incorruptible police, and emotionless juries. Conditions so impossible that the sheer number of executions would horrify even death penalty supporters. The Harvard team had no response. During a debate about the $1.2 million Brinks robbery, Malcolm analyzed the heist with such precision that prison officials banned the topic. Too dangerous, they said, teaching criminals to be better criminals. But the debate that changed everything happened in 1950. The topic: was Homer real or symbolic? Malcolm argued Homer represented European colonization itself. The blindness was how slavers destroyed African languages and cultures so thoroughly that stolen people could never find their way home. Professor William Fisher from MIT, who judged that debate, later wrote that Malcolm's argument was the most profound recontextualization of classical literature he'd ever heard from anyone, let alone a prisoner. Prison warden John O'Brien started restricting debate topics in 1951. No discussions of prison labor, no debates about police corruption, no topics involving systemic racism. Malcolm had turned intellectual debate into revolutionary education, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections wanted it stopped. Before we continue with how Malcolm exposed the media's biggest lies, if you believe these suppressed truths about Black history need to be heard, please subscribe to Black Stories Untold. We're exposing the real stories they tried to bury. Now, back to the video. CBS executives locked away a tape for 30 years. The label read, July 13th, 1959, restricted. When you hear what Malcolm X said on live television that night, you'll understand why they buried it. Mike Wallace thought he was creating sensational television with the hate that hate produced. He thought he'd found America's boogeyman, angry Black Muslims who hated white people. Instead, he gave Malcolm X a weapon more powerful than any gun, a microphone that reached millions. During filming, Wallace asked Malcolm if the nation taught hate. Malcolm's exact response, captured on tape: when you tell someone that a snake is poisonous, the snake calls you a hate monger. We're not teaching hate. We're teaching Black people to love themselves after 400 years of being taught to hate themselves. The documentary backfired spectacularly. Wallace claimed the nation had 250,000 members. They had maybe 8,000. He filmed children at Muhammad University learning Arabic and African history, presenting it as anti-American indoctrination. But what viewers actually saw was Black children learning with pride for the first time in their lives. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover watched that documentary from his office. The next day, July 14, 1959, he ordered full surveillance on Malcolm X under COINTELPRO. File number 100-399-321. Malcolm would remain under constant watch until his death. The New York Police Department's Bureau of Special Services, BOSS, assigned 9 full-time detectives to Malcolm. Detective Gene Roberts infiltrated Malcolm's Organization of Afro-American Unity in 1964. He was standing 3 feet away when the assassination happened. He performed CPR on Malcolm's body, already knowing who ordered the hit. The meeting happened in the hotel room in Harlem, November 23, 1960. No press, no recordings. Just 5 of the most powerful Black leaders in America gathered for one purpose: to discuss what they called the Malcolm problem. Roy Wilkins was there, Whitney Young, a representative from King's organization, and 2 names that were blacked out in the FBI documents for 40 years. They all agreed on one thing: Malcolm X had to be stopped. 3 days earlier, Malcolm had debated Bayard Rustin at Howard University. 3,000 students packed Crampton Auditorium. Rustin argues for King's approach: nonviolent integration, working within the system. Malcolm's response electrifies the room. In the Bible, when the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt, Moses didn't teach integration. Moses didn't tell them to love Pharaoh. Moses said, "Let my people go." Rustin brings up the Constitution. Malcolm counters with the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court ruling that Black people had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. He quotes Chief Justice Roger Taney verbatim, from memory, showing how America's own highest court declared Black people could never be citizens. The NAACP leadership was furious. Roy Wilkins called an emergency meeting on November 23, 1960. The transcript, obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, shows Wilkins saying Malcolm was undoing 20 years of careful progress and radicalizing young Negroes who should be focused on voter registration. Whitney Young of the Urban League went further. In a letter to foundation donors dated December 1, 1960, he wrote that Malcolm X represented the greatest threat to constructive race relations and requested additional funding to counter his destructive influence. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm met exactly once, March 26, 1964, in the Capitol building. The meeting lasted 1 minute. King's aide Andrew Young later revealed that King had been warned by the FBI not to associate with Malcolm. Agent Sullivan's memo, dated March 20, 1964, stated that any alliance between King and Malcolm X would be catastrophic for American stability. Malcolm X stood frozen in Elijah Muhammad's Chicago mansion, staring at documents that would destroy everything he believed in. Bank statements, paternity suits, hospital records. The proof was undeniable. The man who claimed to be God's messenger was a fraud. 7 women, 7 paternity suits, $12,000 monthly in hush money. And Malcolm had recruited most of these women himself, bringing them to work as secretaries for the nation, never knowing what would happen to them. Malcolm built the Nation of Islam from 400 members in 1952 to 75,000 by 1961. He established temples in Detroit, Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Every major recruitment came through his speeches, his newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, his radio broadcasts. Malcolm confronted Muhammad in Chicago on December 1, 1962. Muhammad admitted everything, but claimed Allah gave him special dispensation, comparing himself to biblical prophets with multiple wives. Malcolm walked out devastated. The breaking point came November 22, 1963. President Kennedy is assassinated. At a rally on December 1st, Malcolm says Kennedy's death was chickens coming home to roost, America's violence returning home. Elijah Muhammad silences Malcolm for 90 days. But internal FBI documents show Muhammad had already decided to eliminate Malcolm 2 weeks earlier. Captain Joseph X. Gravitz of the Newark Mosque starts holding meetings about dealing with the hypocrite Malcolm. FBI informant John Ali reports these meetings directly to his handlers. The FBI does nothing to intervene. On June 14, 1964, Malcolm's house in Queens was firebombed. The famous photograph of him holding an M1 carbine at his window was taken that night by ebony photographer Robert Higgins. Malcolm knew who was responsible. He told Alex Haley, "The nation wants me dead, and they're going to get help doing it." A federal judge's order in 2020 forced open a filing cabinet in the J. Edgar Hoover building that was never meant to see daylight until 2039. Inside that cabinet, 3,000 pages documenting the federal government's secret war on Malcolm X. 3,000 pages that make Watergate look like a harmless office prank. To the FBI, Malcolm wasn't a man. He wasn't a minister. He wasn't even a citizen. He was the most dangerous Negro in America. And once they stamped him with that label, the machine moved in. His phones were tapped. His mail was opened. Every speech, every step, every breath was monitored. FBI eyes and ears sat inside his inner circle. Men he shook hands with, men he trusted, feeding his life back to Hoover. And the darkest part? They knew people were plotting to kill him, and they chose to do nothing. COINTELPRO wasn't surveillance, it was sabotage. In 1963, the FBI forged a letter and made it look like Malcolm wrote it, calling Elijah Muhammad a decrepit old man. That single fake letter, exposed years later by the 1975 Church Committee hearings, deepened the cracks between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam, exactly as the FBI intended. And when Malcolm began to rise beyond America's borders, the government panicked. In 1964, the State Department revoked his passport just as he was gaining global support. He had already met Nasser in Egypt, Nkrumah in Ghana, and was preparing to address the Organization of African Unity. Secretary of State Dean Rusk personally signed the order, claiming national security. Meanwhile, the CIA tracked him through 5 African countries, sending reports back to Washington as Malcolm built international alliances. The agency watched, calculated, and ultimately decided to let domestic elements handle the problem. And then there was New York. NYPD files declassified in 2020 show that 3 days before Malcolm's murder, his security detail was mysteriously reduced. Uniformed officers were pulled away from the Audubon Ballroom, leaving only 2 inside the building on the day he was assassinated. The message buried in those 3,000 pages is simple, chilling, and undeniable. Malcolm X was surrounded by enemies long before the gunman walked into that ballroom. The letter arrived at Betty Shabazz's home on April 25, 1964. Malcolm's handwriting, but the words were different, changed. The man who'd preached separation for 12 years had seen something in Mecca that shattered his worldview. And that transformation signed his death warrant. "I've eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug with fellow Muslims whose skin was the whitest white and whose hair was the blondest blonde," he wrote. This transformation terrified everyone. Malcolm wasn't abandoning Black nationalism. He was expanding it into human rights. He planned to charge the United States with genocide at the United Nations. He had support from 34 African nations. The vote was scheduled for March 1965. On February 14, 1965, Malcolm's house was firebombed again. This time, his family barely escapes. Malcolm tells photographer Gordon Parks, "They'll get me in a public place with lots of witnesses, so everyone knows not to follow my path." February 21st, 1965, 3:10 p.m. Talmadge Hayer, Norman 3X Butler, and Thomas 15X Johnson rise from their seats. Malcolm's bodyguard, Gene Roberts, the undercover cop, steps aside. 21 gunshots. Malcolm dies at 3:30 p.m. at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. At the funeral, Ossie Davis delivers the eulogy. "Malcolm was our manhood, our living Black manhood." Actor Ruby Dee screams, "They killed him! All of them killed him!" She meant the nation, the government, and the Black leaders who abandoned him. And so, As we reach the final truth, the one they never intended for us to see, we're left with the reality that, for decades, they told us we were paranoid. Then, in 2021, the Manhattan DA admitted the truth. Two innocent men, Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson, spent 20 years in prison, while the real shooters, men the FBI already knew, walked free. Talmadge Hayer confessed back in 1977 and named his accomplices. The FBI had it, the NYPD had it, and they buried it for 44 years. One day after the assassination, Hoover signed a memo that read, "Malcolm X has been neutralized. Case closed." And while the Nation of Islam held a victory celebration, FBI wiretaps picked up Captain Joseph saying, "The hypocrite got what he deserved." Agents listening did nothing. And the most chilling part? Malcolm predicted every piece of it. He warned Gordon Parks, "They'll make it look like Muslims did it. The nation will take credit. The government will close the file. And black leaders will be secretly relieved." He was right about everything. They killed his body, but they made him immortal. Every attempt to silence him amplified him. Today, his autobiography has sold 20 million copies. Universities teach the speeches that once terrified them. And in 1999, the US government, the same one that marked him as a threat, put his face on a stamp. Malcolm's beefs weren't drama, they were revelations. Each clash exposed another layer of corruption, hypocrisy, and fear. He showed that being respectable wouldn't save you. He proved that truth hits harder than violence. And every enemy he made was proof he was disrupting systems that needed to be shaken. They united to kill him because they were divided. They knew they couldn't stop him. Yet even now, his words still haunt the powerful, by any means necessary. They tried to bury Malcolm, but he was a seed. His fight didn't end in the Audubon ballroom, it multiplied. And the same forces that targeted him then still exist today. The only question left is simple. Are you brave enough to continue his fight? Comment your thoughts, because your truth might be the next one they try to erase. If this conspiracy...
All right, all praise to the Most High. You know, I have to be honest. I can't get enough of Malcolm X. Honestly, I mean the historical context that this man had is, I can't say unmatched, because it's other brothers that have, you know, a similar story, but I mean in this modern time, yeah, it's rather amazing. It's rather amazing that all these people had conspired together and separately to put an end to this man, because this man spoke so much truth that the only resolution that they had was to end his existence. That was the only resolution that anybody could come up with. Nobody could beat what he was saying. Nobody could contradict what he was saying. Nobody could give any resolution other than, you know, cut off his living, and that is unheard of. I mean, yeah, I mean that is unheard of. I hate making this comparison, but the only other person that I can think of like that is the Messiah, literally. And I'm not saying Malcolm is on the level with him. I'm not saying that, but that's the only other place that I can think of in my thinking where that was the ultimate resolution. And it happened in both instances. And it's unreal to say the least. But his story is in modern times, and in the times of between my parents and myself, lifetime, is probably second to none. And yeah, he I want to say he's a man to be revered, but he was a man, and we don't worship men.
Right.
However, understanding that the love that Malcolm Little, Malcolm X, Malcolm Shabazz, whatever you want to call him, had in his heart for his people, and he wore that as his uniform, and it was known that he never hid it. Is I have not seen that replicated. I have not seen that duplicated, and I have not seen that. I've not seen that. Not since my parents' lifetime. Not any other person since my parents' lifetime to my lifetime, and even into my children's lifetime. I have not seen that replicated. So I'm gonna rest there. But again, this is not drawing a comparison or a similitude to him and the Messiah. The Messiah is the greatest man who ever lived. Period. Point blank. But way down, light years away, there was a man whose name was Malcolm X, and he was not comparable to the Messiah, but when it comes to men, yeah, he was up there. He was at the top when it comes to men. So I'll rest there. Go ahead, Aki.
Con, I understand what you're saying, and I mean you're right. Like, I mean, there's no comparison in regards to the level of importance the Messiah is on.
Right.
And we know that there's the only one higher than the Messiah is the Most High Himself. Elder Malcolm was truly a soldier for his people, and a very interesting life that he lived, and cut down before he turned 40.
Yeah.
Was incarcerated at the age of 20.
Mm-hmm.
And spent some time behind bars, concrete and iron,
Right.
But his parents were followers of the man that we were just covering before, Marcus Garvey. They were followers of Marcus Garvey. He later joined an organization of a man that was a follower of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey's whole movement was about the upliftment of and betterment of our people. So that's it's crazy how it all tied in together and what all of that produced. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was checking out a story earlier about the demise of Elder Malcolm, and we continue to be our own worst enemies.
Always.
I know you're aware of the situation, but Malcolm making aware of other people of some of the things that the leader, his former leader, had done with a few females. They say became his death sentence. I think a lot of wicked men jumped at the opportunity to put down a righteous man because they were afraid of him.
Yeah.
He was definitely on a different plane, different than Martin. You know what I mean? They say he was more upright than Martin, but Martin gets the usually gets the credit for being upright. But what the feds say is he was more upright than Martin. So I'm a yield there. I just feel like I'm rambling now, but what can we say about the elder Malcolm?
Yeah, it's literally, it's literally a phenomenon. All things equal, and it is amazing to make that tie that his parents were Garveyites, and he had some express ties to that, uh, from his youth. So, uh, right, it's amazing. It's literally amazing. And again, I don't want anybody to hear this or see this and go, "Oh, Hezekiah is worshiping a man." Never. The only man that I would even consider worshiping would be Hamashiach, the Messiah, the son of the Most High, not any other man. But in reality, you have to understand that what this man, Malcolm X, did, and what he represented, and what he sought to resolve. Don't get me wrong, Marcus Garvey was amazing. He was literally amazing, and the fact that he died at 52 with natural causes, that's not a mark against him. That's just because he was before. They knew that they couldn't afford another Garvey-like person, and they were concerned that Malcolm was that. And not only that, here's the craziest part about it: Malcolm's insight also led to the demise of even what's the brother's name from Chicago?
The revolutionary, man, Bobby Seals, not Bobby Seals, but man,
20-year-old brother. He I think he was 20 years old when he died. Oh man, I can't think. We'll figure it out. But we're gonna go ahead to this last video and wrap it all up. We'll come back with that. But Fred Hampton, that's it. Fred Hampton. Yeah. So because they didn't want another Malcolm X or another Malcolm X like person, they got rid of Fred Hampton. When all Fred Hampton was trying to do, Fred Hampton was actually trying to it was more like what Martin was doing. He was trying to put the poor folks together and make us somehow. I don't know how that was going to work, but anyway, let's go to this last video. This video is called "The Fall of America Has Already Begun for Black People." This also from Black Stories Untold. As always, all videos are linked in the description box, and you can find the links to those videos there. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get to it.
America is collapsing right before your eyes. The banks are failing. The middle class is vanishing. Police violence is everywhere. And trust in the government, gone. Evaporated into headlines and hollow speeches. But here's the truth they won't tell you. Black America has already lived through this collapse for 400 years. The poverty that shocks you now, we were born in it. The police brutality filling your feeds, we've been screaming it for generations. The wealth gap that suddenly feels like a crisis, we never had wealth to lose. You're watching the empire eat itself. And for us, it's just history on replay. Because everything devouring this country now was tested on us first. Every policy, every prison, every broken promise of freedom. So ask yourself, how did Black Americans see this collapse coming before anyone else did? What tactics perfected in our neighborhoods are now spreading everywhere? And why, after centuries of warning, is the empire finally eating itself alive? This isn't a prophecy. It's deja vu. The collapse already happened. We just lived through the trailer first. When your cities burn, we remember ours burning first. When your paychecks shrink, we remember working for none at all. When your leaders lie, we remember when those lies were written into law. What's breaking you now is just the echo of what broke us centuries ago. The system didn't collapse on its own. It got engineered to extract. And we were the first to pay. So if you think America is collapsing, you're only seeing the sequel. The first showing played in black and white, and nobody listened. The original sin. Building wealth on stolen bodies. They tell you America became great through innovation and hard work. They're lying. Its wealth was built on oppression, and now the cracks are widening. For black people, the collapse isn't coming. It's already on the horizon. The greatest heist in human history didn't happen in secret. It happened in broad daylight, signed by presidents, protected by law, and blessed by churches. By the time anyone called out the theft, the thieves had already turned their spoils into an empire. By 1860, if the South had been its own country, it would have ranked as the 4th richest nation on earth. That wealth came from one source: enslaved black people who never saw a penny. Cotton was king, and every ounce of its gold-lined crown was picked by black hands. The South produced 75% of the world's cotton supply, feeding the entire global economy. But here's what they never taught you in school. The market value of enslaved people was 7 times the total US currency in circulation. 7 times. More wealth was tied up in black bodies than in every bank, railroad, and factory combined. And the wealth didn't stay confined to the South. It flowed north, fueling an entire nation. Northern textile mills in Massachusetts and Rhode Island spun that cotton into profit. Wall Street bankers issued bonds backed by enslaved people as collateral. Insurance companies in Connecticut sold policies protecting slave owners from loss if a person escaped or died. The entire architecture of American capitalism, property law, banking, corporate contracts, insurance, was built to protect wealth extracted from black bodies. Human beings became assets. Flesh turned into finance. America's first stock market didn't rise on industry. It rose on human lives. For 250 years, black labor generated trillions in wealth, not metaphorical wealth, literal capital that built railroads, funded universities, and filled vaults with gold. Then came 1865. The 13th Amendment ended legal slavery, but freedom came with nothing attached. No land, no tools, no payback for centuries of stolen labor. Meanwhile, white families who had grown rich from that theft kept every dollar, every acre, every head start. The people who built the house weren't even allowed to sleep on the porch. And you'd think that's where the story ends, but it's not. Because the government wasn't done stealing from black people. What came next would lock us out of wealth for another century. Before we go further, if you're realizing these connections for the first time, subscribe to Black Stories Untold. We're exposing the patterns they've spent centuries hiding. Now, let's talk about what happened next. The housing trap. How government created the wealth gap. They didn't leave it to chance. They drew it. In the 1930s, the federal government hired men with rulers and stamps to color the future of American cities. Neighborhoods with black families went in red and got the label hazardous. Not for crime, not for economics, but for race. This didn't rely on private prejudice. Federal policy orchestrated it, executed with ruthless, bureaucratic precision. The government flooded the housing market with low-interest, federally backed mortgages, while steering almost none of that capital to black families. Homeownership stopped being just a roof. It became a college fund, seed money for a business, and a ticket into better schools. A generational advantage handed out and stamped, not for you. They codified exclusion. Developers added restrictive covenants to deeds using sample language from the Federal Housing Administration. Whole suburbs rose engineered to exclude black families. Black doctors and veterans found the same doors closed. Banks denied loans. Realtors refused to show houses in appreciating areas. And when black families managed to buy, they paid more for less. The consequence stacked across generations. By the time housing discrimination became illegal, white families had decades of federally subsidized appreciation in the bank. Black families had been blocked at every turn. Today, the median white family holds roughly 10 times the wealth of the median black family. Homes in formerly redline neighborhoods lag far behind the old best zones. Numbers hide the mechanism. Property taxes fund schools, so redline neighborhoods get underfunded classrooms. No home equity means no collateral for business loans, strangling entrepreneurship before it starts. Credit systems punish those locked out of wealth-building tools. Young Black adults carry credit scores far below white peers, and that gap widens with age. A Black family with advanced degrees can still have far less wealth than a white family with less education. The pattern is brutal and simple. Exclusion compounded into inheritance, investment, education, and opportunity. Generation after generation. They blocked our wealth through housing. But if you want to keep an entire population poor forever, real estate isn't enough. You also lock them up. The modern plantation. Mass incarceration as control. A White House advisor once admitted, "We couldn't make being Black illegal, so we found another way." And that way has shaped every law, every policy, and every system meant to control Black lives in America. They criminalized survival, community, and the tools Black people used to thrive. They flooded neighborhoods with drugs, then built prisons to cage the fallout. When the advisor later confessed, nobody faced consequences. The machine was already running. The government declared drug abuse public enemy number one, but the so-called war on drugs never fought drugs. It waged war on people. Prison numbers exploded. Today, millions are locked behind bars, half for drug offenses. 2/3 are Black or Latino, and drug use shows no difference across race. The disparity was engineered. 5 grams of earned the same sentence as 500 grams of powder. A 100-to-1 ratio. Crack was labeled a Black drug, powder a white drug. Chemically identical, but one filled prisons while the other didn't. Young Black men are 20 times more likely to be incarcerated than white peers. Nearly half of Black males face arrest before age 23. Police violence compounds the crisis. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be killed by police and 5 times more likely to be unarmed. Of those killed, 18 to 24-year-olds represent nearly a third, a small demographic suffering disproportionately. The trauma radiates. Research shows police killings of unarmed Black Americans create tens of millions of additional poor mental health days annually. This isn't PTSD, it's ongoing trauma. A felony conviction follows a lifetime. No housing, no loans, no professional licenses, no voting rights. Poverty becomes criminalized, then permanent. The plantation didn't end, it evolved. They perfected these tactics on us. But now those same tactics are spreading to everyone. The blueprint spreads. Every weapon tested on Black bodies doesn't stay there. Eventually, it turns, aimed at everyone else, creeping silently through the cracks of a society built to protect a few. This isn't accidental. Systems built to crush people don't stop when you ask nicely. They crave more. And America is running out of Black people to feed it. Stop and frisk policing got perfected in Black neighborhoods, with officers stopping people without probable cause. Evidence of crime appeared in only 3% of stops, but the program continued because control mattered more than justice. Police militarization followed. The 1033 program funneled military-grade equipment to local departments. The first armored vehicles, combat gear, and tactical weapons went to communities already under siege, where fear kept people in line. Predictive policing algorithms trained on decades of biased arrest records now send officers to the same neighborhoods repeatedly. It looks scientific, but history is repeating itself. Automated. These tactics didn't stay in Black neighborhoods. They spread. Surveillance technologies tested on Black streets now monitor suburbs and rural towns. Militarized police forces that patrolled inner cities now patrol opioid-ravaged white towns. Predatory lending that crushed Black homeownership decades earlier fueled a nationwide mortgage meltdown, helping trigger the 2008 financial collapse. For decades, Black neighborhoods existed as deserts, food deserts with no fresh groceries, banking deserts where check cashing businesses replaced banks, healthcare deserts with distant, underfunded hospitals. Now, those deserts are spreading to deindustrialized towns, Rust Belt cities, and hollowed out suburbs. The playbook refined on Black communities is being deployed everywhere. Systems built on extraction eventually run out of people to extract from. And when that happens, they start eating themselves. We've been here. You're just arriving. Black people aren't prophets. We don't predict. We witness. And what we've seen, the world is only beginning to feel. For 400 years, we've stood at the finish line of America's race to the bottom, watching everyone else sprint toward disaster while screaming warnings that nobody wanted to hear. Now you've arrived. Welcome to where we've always been. When the pandemic hit, Black communities suffered first and hardest. The same neighborhoods redlined decades ago faced the worst health outcomes. When recessions strike, Black unemployment spikes higher and lasts longer. When banks fail, Black neighborhoods lose the most. When tough-on-crime laws pass, Black people fill the prisons. We've survived what keeps trying to destroy us. We created jazz, blues, rock and roll, and hip-hop, the soundtrack of America, while being denied entry to the venues where it thrived. We built businesses in redlined neighborhoods that banks refused to touch. We raised families under laws designed to criminalize our very existence. Every generation of Black Americans has been rebuilt from ashes. Every generation has been told to wait, to compromise, to accept incremental change, while the mechanisms of theft ran at full speed. And yet, we're still here, still building, still demanding what was stolen. We've survived 400 years of systematic destruction. We'll survive this too. The truth that changes everything. As the curtain falls, the truth you've been avoiding finally steps into the light. The empire is crumbling, built on stolen Black wealth, stolen Black labor, stolen Black lives. Every brick rotted from the start. You're not witnessing the beginning of collapse. You're watching the final act of a con that has been running since 1619. The poverty now spreading through white working-class neighborhoods? We know that poverty. The police violence turning streets into battlefields. We've been brutalized. The sense that institutions don't represent you, that the system is rigged? We never bought the lie that the rules applied equally to all. The collapse came for Black people 400 years ago, and we are still here, still rising, still unbroken. The rest of America is only now arriving at the finish line we've been standing on all along. Every system cracking, every institution failing, every illusion of stability unraveling. All of it has been tested, refined, and perfected on Black communities first. The empire shakes because the foundation can no longer hold. The machinery of exploitation, the laws, the policies, the wealth built on stolen lives, they are turning inward, devouring themselves. And while others scramble in panic, we remain, enduring what history has taught us to endure, watching the stage collapse around those who believed it would last forever. This is more than history. This is proof. Proof that the system built to oppress some eventually consumes all. And we are still standing, still building, still demanding what was stolen, still unbroken. The empire is falling, but we remain unbroken. If the collapse America is finally seeing today was built on 400 years of stolen Black wealth and labor, how long before the system turns on everyone else? Comment your thoughts below and look closely. It's the same pattern, playing out across the country today. The empire is shaking, the stage is set, and history is watching. The impact of the past stretches into the present. Watch the next video to see.
All right. Interesting, because some of what he said, I disagree with. And some of what he said was spot on. I believe they did run a lot of those programs on our people, and they did those experiments to see what was possible when it came to our people. I believe that wholeheartedly, but I would have to disagree with the brother when he says Black people are prophets, because we can see things coming because our experience has been that of hard time, and so that opens your eyes and makes you to see things clearly because optimism is not something that we can just be, you know, blindly follow because optimism has never been uh, for our good. It's never been good for us to be optimistic about these circumstances. Uh, so we had to look at things for what they actually are, and not for what they hopefully will turn out to be. And the reality is sobering because it'll make you realize that you're not. It's not gonna go well if you're not prepared. You have to prepare for all these situations, for all these circumstances. And I think I think without that, you lose that sense of preparation. Therefore, you lose um, that sense of I got to keep this thing from falling down. And without that, you just kind of ride the wave. And when you're riding the wave and the wave has been seemingly good, you just used to jumping on that wave and just riding it. And before you know it, you crashing into a boulder, and you didn't think that boulder was going to be there. Well, a person who's not optimistic is going to say, if I ride this wave, I could crash into anything. I can't see up under this wave, and so I can't just comfortably do that. And yeah, they don't even get in the water. I know that's kind of a euphemism, but the reason I'm saying that is because that's the reality that we've had to deal with. So, um, does that make us prophets? I'm not saying that makes us prophets per se, but it definitely puts us in a position to see things before they happen. And all the prophets in the scriptures were so-called black people. Uh, yeah, so that's something to think about. Yeah, that's all I got. I'm gonna rest there. Go ahead, Akeem.
I kind of thought this video was going to be going a different direction, and
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I disagree with quite a bit, and other like you said, other points. He was spot on. I think I'm so focused. I try to stay so focused on what the scriptures tell me is going to happen. And some of this lines up with the scripts, and I don't know, but yeah, I don't have much to really say about that right there.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be different too. I really did, but what he said, it makes sense to a degree. Yeah, you kind of trust. They kind of test pilot in certain things, but I think to see the system fail is just a necessary uh, part of what the Most High put in place. That same system would end up failing you. Much like you think about it from a scriptural standpoint. Look what happened with Amalek and how Amalek would attack the elders and the children and sought to destroy those who were the least able to protect themselves and to do anything. And as a result, the Most High has sworn he would have war with Amalek forever. And his resolution for that is, I'm gonna get you completely off of the earth. Now he put them on the earth, and he's vowed to get rid of them. So, yeah, okay. All right. Well, we've had a good long review today. It went hour and a half, and that was a long time. three videos to review. I hope you have enjoyed this particular review, and I hope you learned something, taking something away from this. As a reminder, always we do this for a very specific reason. Romans chapter 10 and verse 1, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to her Abba for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people return to the prominence that the Most High have promised for us to have. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in Hamashiach, in the Messiah, for his return and his restoration of the children of Israel. Also, Ecclesiastes chapter number 12 and verse 13. Let us, at the conclusion of the whole matter, fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, you are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged, or rather, we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, as always, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Amashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruch, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, shalom, family.
Shalom, shalom, Mr. Picard.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah. Kwam Yasha'Allah.
Kwam Yashala.
And Barak Hashem Yahweh.